we had an amazing weekend down a little south of here in Milton and Pensacola, Florida. We went to the Gulf Coast Homesteaders Meetup. We were one of the farms that came to speak, and we had such a great time with friends that we've known for a while, and we made a bunch of new friends. So that's pretty much a success in my mind. So I was super pumped that that's how that weekend turned out. But we are back home, and I've got some work to do in the garden to get us ready for when the onion starts that I ordered from Haas Tools get here in another couple of weeks. Speaking of the Gulf Coast Homesteaders Meetup, I want to say a big thanks to my new friends Alan and Wendy at A&W Mini Farm for the sweet hat that they gave me this weekend. I love it. Thanks, y'all. All right, so last week I got these brassica starts in the ground, and I'm pretty happy with how they are going so far. But as you can see over there and over there and a few places in between, I was in such a rush to get them in that I left the garden in kind of a mess when I finished. So I really need to get the garden cleaned up. I need to get those pots as well as all of the plant tags that got left in the row. I need to get those picked up. Also, you can probably see we've got some weeds starting to come through. They're kind of all through the garden here. So I need to get the garden weeded before the weeds really start taking over. Especially this area over here, because this is where our onions are going to go when they get here. And you can see it's getting pretty green over here quick with all of those weeds coming through. So that's what I'm going to work on for the next little bit. I'm going to get the garden weeded and get cleaned up a little bit. And then once I get things weeded in the rows and get the pots out of the way, I'm going to go through my onion rows at least with my double wheel hoe, and I'm going to just kind of scrape the top off of the middle of the rows, and then I'm going to rake that dirt back on top of my hilled rows. And if you haven't been around when I've talked about the hilled rows before, or maybe you want a reminder, the reason I do hilled rows, and here I'll show you what I'm talking about. Excuse the weeds that I'm about to get up, but I do hilled rows. So you can see right here how down this way is in between the rows, and then you're on top of the row, and then you go back down in between the rows. The reason that I hill up rows like this is because our area gets a lot of rain in a short amount of time, and then it can also go quite a while without any rain at all. And so even though we're in one of the wettest regions in the country, it's not consistent. So putting everything into these raised rows makes it where I can use my drip tape irrigation system to control pretty well the water level that is in these rows. So I can control how wet the roots are of the plants a little bit better. If it was all just kind of flat like that, then the water would probably just get stuck in the ground, and when it's dry, it would all dry out uniformly. But with these taller hills, underneath where the plant base is stays a little bit wetter because there's more of a gap between that and where the roots are. And then when it rains really heavily, the water doesn't sit on top of where the plants are. Instead, it rolls down the sides. So enough of that rain soaks into the raised row to be able to water those plants, but it doesn't get stuck like it might if it were in the ground. So that means that I have more control over how wet the roots of the plants are, which means when there's a lot of rain, they'll be a little bit drier than the surrounding area, and when there's no rain, I can quickly use my drip tape irrigation system to put water right on those roots, right around the dirt around those roots, so that they get taken care of. Even if the rest of the dirt is completely dry, I can put enough dirt underneath the ground that they will do well growing that way. So while I'm going around picking up the trash that I left in the garden after planting, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a primer on what we talked about at the Homesteaders meetup. In case you weren't there or you didn't see the video that we put up earlier this week or last week that had our talk in it for when we spoke at the meetup. I'm going to dump out this starting mix that's in these pots just kind of on top of the row randomly here, and it'll get dispersed throughout the garden and just become part of the soil here. But I noticed that these plants did well in this mix, and so I'm not worried about it having anything in it that is going to harm the garden. If anything, it'll just help it. So I'm going to dump that out here and then stack these pots. And I will reuse these pots whenever I start stuff in smaller cells and need something to just step up for a week or two. I'll use them until they break. These are just kind of the flimsy pots that I got some plants from a local nursery from, and that's what they were in. So I'll keep them and reuse them so that it's not just a single-use plastic. But anyways, so what we talked about in our talk at the Homesteaders meetup was the most important parts of our farm and how we got started in the hatching business, as it were. If you don't know, we are a small specialty hatchery, and we hatch certain chicken breeds that people like for certain characteristics, and some of those characteristics are egg color, but also we specialize in a variety of the Americana breed called self blue Americanas, and they're those really pretty silver color, blue color chickens that you've seen on our Instagram or Facebook or even in our YouTube videos. And so we talked about how we got started with that hatchery business and how those were our specializations. That, as well as, I mentioned egg color already, but that rainbow color egg basket that everybody likes to have. We specialize in different colors of eggs as well. So as we told everybody that was at the conference, what our products were that came off of our farm, we wanted to make sure that we mentioned what our most important product is. And it's not hatching eggs, and it's not chicks. It's not even fun farm videos. The most important product from our farm isn't anything that we literally grow here. The most important product of our farm is the love and joy that our family shares with one another and that we share with you. Now, I love to talk about gardening and other parts of the farm, but really, that's not the most important thing that we do here. And so, this coming season, for my fall and winter garden, but also next spring, I'm gonna try really hard so that whenever someone asks me, what are you growing in your garden? Or what do you grow in your garden? I'm gonna tell them about the love that our family shares here on the farm and the ways that we share our joy with all of you. I am still gonna brag about whatever size onions I wind up with after this winter. And you know that however this broccoli turns out, I'm gonna share it with all of you and anyone who will listen. Maybe even a few folks that don't wanna listen. Okay, probably a lot of folks that don't want to listen. But even with all of that literal garden talk, I hope that every time I talk to somebody about what's going on in my garden or other places on the farm, that I will remember what our most important product is: love and hope. So, I hope that y'all will join me in the next year or so, making love and hope and joy a habit. Those are the things that I hope to cultivate this year. And when I ask you in the comments of a video, or if we meet up at one of the meetup events that we're going to be doing in the next year, or anything like that, when I ask you, what are you growing in your garden? I hope that you'll also be able to say that you're growing lots of love and joy and hope. So now I've got all of the trash out of the garden rows, and I'm ready to grab my stirrup hoe and get to work on weeding. So what I'm going to do with that is I'm just going to take my stirrup hoe and just scrape the top of the ground around here. Now you might see as I go through and do this that the ground is pretty wet right now, like really wet. Like my feet and my toes are in the mud. And so it's not going to be as straightforward as stirrup hoeing normally is. But I do want to go ahead and get a start on this while I've got a little bit of time today, and that way hopefully as soon as our onion starts come in, we will be ready to go ahead and put them in the ground, and there won't be a whole lot of prep work left to do. I find that one of the big mistakes that I often make is not having the prep work done whenever I get a live plant. And so my live plants wind up sitting for too long, and a lot of times I'm nursing them back to health by the time I put them in the ground. That is a lesson I have learned, and I am taking that lesson seriously today. So I'm going to go ahead and get my prep work done so that as soon as those onions come in the mail, I can get them in the ground. The stirrup hoe is definitely my most used garden tool, and it's because it's just really easy to use and it does a really good job. I'm just going through and scraping the top of the soil with this, and not only is it getting the weeds, it's just cutting the weeds off and pulling their roots a little bit. Not only is it doing that, but it's also breaking this soil up just a little bit. It's doing a little bit of cultivating. So that means that when I'm done doing this, the ground is fluffier wherever I've been, and it's a whole lot easier to rake once I've done this. And because I do these raised rows, I like to rake all of this up onto the row after I've done this. I like to work my way backwards as I go down the rows so that I don't have to step where I just fluffed up the ground yet. Now I'll have to step in some of these areas as I go through with a rake in a little bit, but this way I'm not compacting down the soil that I just cultivated, and it'll be nice and fluffy for whenever I want to rake it into these rows. If you face really heavy weed pressure, you're definitely not alone. It's something that a lot of folks deal with. And honestly, if you've got a lot of weed pressure, probably means you have decent soil, right? If the weeds will grow really well, maybe your garden will too. So don't be too discouraged by that weed pressure. Just know that it's a whole lot easier, just like with pest control, to manage weeds before they get out of hand. So the weeds that I'm pulling up, you see as I'm doing this, are just little tiny sprouts. And that's because I can stay on top of this weed pressure by coming out here once a week or so and doing this. And honestly, you see how fast I'm going through. I can do the whole garden in 20 or 30 minutes if I'm touching every single part of the soil. And normally I don't have to, because if I'm out here once a week, I'm really just hitting those problem areas where I can see the sprouts coming up, and they never get big enough to be an issue. But I find that simple tools like this stirrup hoe and my single tine cultivator from Haas Tools work the very best for this. And you can see this is not back-breaking work like bending over and pulling weeds out. And so I really enjoy this part of gardening. We've got all of the weeding done on the side of the garden that the onions are going to go in. You can see it's just that fluffy cultivated soil that's left exposed. All the green that's still in there, those are the tops of the weeds that will be either picked out if they're big pieces and thrown to the side, or they'll just be raked into the bed. And I know that that could potentially lead to some seeds being in there or some roots finding a place to grow again. But honestly, that never really seems to be a really big issue because I do stay on top of the sprouts when they come up. While I love the way that this freshly cultivated soil looks, I do need to rake it so that it's nice and pretty and in the raised rows, and that way if we do get a rain, it's going to kind of set those rows instead of washing out this freshly fluffed up soil. We're not really supposed to get much rain anytime soon, but I'd rather go ahead and do it than be worried about it, and that way it'll be nice and pretty, and I like having a pretty garden. So let's rake these rows. So like I was saying about how when the ground is wet, it's harder to weed, it's also a little bit harder to rake. So I'm actually having to use the back of this rake to rake these up, rake this soil up onto the hilled rows. So I'm at the midpoint of raking my onion rows up, and I wanted to show you how much of a difference it makes just raking this fluffed up soil into the raised rows. So here's what the rows look like before I rake them. This is right after going over them with my stirrup hoe all the way down. And you can see there's some green out there from the weeds that I just did, and everything is nice and soft and fluffy and spread out, and that looks really good. But here is what it looks like when it's raked up, and I just love the way that these raised beds look right after I rake them up, and they hold this shape really well. Up until it rains, they pretty much look fluffy like this and stay kind of perfect for planting. But after it rains, they do kind of compact down just a little bit, but they still retain that raised shape. And I'll go ahead and show you what it looks like if I let the rows go for a couple of weeks without any maintenance, if it rains really hard a couple of times. This is what it looks like if that happens. So here is a row of collard greens that I planted, and you can see that the row kind of looks beat up, and some of that is that I didn't rake it after I planted these, but you get a good idea of what the compacting of the soil looks like after really heavy rain. We're coming up on our wettest part of the year. As we go through our winter time, that's when we get the most rain here in Alabama. Now, we do get a lot of rain throughout the year, and so that's not saying that we won't have a year where we don't have as much rain in the winter as we do another time of the year. That's just saying normally this is when we have the most rain. So it's not unlikely that I'll wind up doing as much row maintenance and weeding during the month of December as I did in the month of April. But honestly, having a pretty garden is pretty important to me. And like I said before, I really enjoy doing maintenance in the garden most of the time, so you won't hear me complain about it too much. Wait a minute. Did he just say that he likes weeding and doing maintenance in the garden? Who likes weeding? So I get it. I know that not everybody enjoys such mundane and manual tasks as weeding, but there's something special about doing that sort of thing that doesn't require a whole lot of constant focus in the garden. I tend to think a lot when I'm out here in the garden, especially when I'm doing stuff that I don't have to focus on a whole lot, stuff that I just don't have to think about, like raking. I think an awful lot, and something that I try and think about often, and that I almost always wind up coming back to anyways, is gratitude. In fact, even just today, while I've been raking out here, I've been thinking about all of the folks that have helped us in the last couple of years as we've started this homesteading and family farm journey. Think about all of you who help us out by being part of our community and watching our silly videos and telling us that you enjoy when we share our joy and happiness, and how you hold us accountable so that we will experience that joy together. We remember to slow down and take time together. I feel a tremendous amount of gratitude for all of the people who do similar things to us, who do this whole homesteading, farming thing, and have taught us so much about doing this and about this lifestyle. These people that have loved us this year as we've started this journey with them and have accepted us into community with them and have invited us into all sorts of journeys in their own lives. Honestly, I couldn't be more grateful for my family, for Eleanor and Jacqueline. If it weren't for them, all of this would be pointless. There's no way I would do all of this without the two of them. And also our family beyond, just the three of us, they make life so much better. And being out here on this farm with Jacqueline and Eleanor over the last couple of years has been life-changing. It's been an experience and a series of experiences that I never imagined I would get to enjoy. And it definitely has made me a better person. So just like I told you that we grow love here, we grow joy here, we grow hope here, I also feel like as I'm going through and doing this maintenance and care in the garden, that what I'm planting in this garden is that gratefulness and gratitude that I mentioned. I feel that as I'm working in here, it's almost like I'm planting that gratitude into the ground like a seed, or maybe it's what I'm nurturing the seedlings and plants with in here. I don't know, but I feel like that gratitude is almost being put down into the soil with this stuff. And I don't mean literally. Let's stay with the metaphor here, but I feel like as we do this work together, that we can't help but grow love and joy here, especially when we're sending it out through YouTube and Facebook and Instagram, through our interactions with people as we go off the farm. We take that gratitude, that love, and that hope and that joy with us wherever we go. And when we come into contact with folks, whether it's helping people through ministries and missions that we're involved with, whether it's just going to work and doing our job, or whether it's having a conversation that starts out, so what are you growing in your garden this year? I hope that as we go through this next season of our lives together, that we will tell everyone that we grow love and hope and joy here, and we sow those seeds with gratitude. Would y'all look at what we did today? Man, it is pretty out here. I just love these raised rows that I've been doing. I just think that they're pretty. It helps me keep weed pressure down. Like I said, it helps me be more particular about water. That helps me conserve water, but also make sure that the plants get just enough or the right amount. So every gardener knows that this is not the end of the work, right? This is just the beginning. Yeah, it looks pretty, but it's gonna look way prettier when it's got plants growing up through it, right? So it'll take some maintenance. It'll take some work. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, I'll get my onion starts in that I ordered, and I'll get to plant those out here, and we're gonna overwinter those because that's kind of the best way to grow onions in Alabama. And since I'm in Alabama, I'm gonna use short day onions. If you have a wild hair or plans to grow onions, make sure that you check and get the right variety. There are 3 different types. There's long day, intermediate day, and short day. We need short day here. and we're growing it during the winter time, during those short days, right? See how that works? And then as the days start to get longer, which I believe is December 21st, December 21st being our longest night, so that next day, December 22nd, will be slightly longer, right? So that's whenever the bulbs for our onions will start to really grow. So we'll see some green before then, and then midway through December, that's about when the bulbs will start to grow. And that's where that energy and nutrition will go into that bulb growth. So we'll grow those all the way into the spring. That'll give us a nice long growing season for the bulbs of those onions, and then we'll pull those out. I would think about midway through spring, but we'll see. I think I read that it was like 125 days from planting. So we'll see how that works out. I think that puts us right at the beginning of April if we get them in the next couple weeks. So that means that they will be coming out at just the right time to be planting our spring starts that we are going to be putting together. And it looks like we're going to be building a window greenhouse this winter, and I am really pumped about it. Can you tell? I'm a little bit excited. So we're going to be building that window greenhouse out, and that'll be great. That'll be where I'll do my starts for my spring garden this year. And that was one of my goals for 2022, was by the end of the year to at least be working on building a greenhouse. So that's going to be a fun project that we're going to do here on the farm, and that'll be where we'll start our spring garden starts this year. All right, y'all, so we got this side looking nice and pretty. It's ready for the onions. So those onion starts are not going to sit too long like some of my other starts have. They will be nice and healthy and get a great start. They're coming from Hoss, so I know they're going to be in great shape when they get here. And then I turn over to this side. Oh man, this side definitely needs some work. But as I was walking through there, you can see it is just super dirty. I mean, super wet. Look at this, y'all. Got a little ladybug on there. I don't think that's a true ladybug because it's not red, but still pretty. So all of this area right here is really holding some moisture. So I'm gonna give it another day or two before I get in here and start working on these weeds that are through here. And that'll give the soil a chance to dry out just a little bit, which will make it a little bit easier to go through here with my wheel hoe and my stirrup hoe. Even though the rows aren't pretty yet, y'all check this broccoli out. I am so excited. This stuff has already started growing pretty well, and it's only been in for a few days, and so I could not be happier with how this broccoli is turning out. And I've got 2 rows of broccoli here, and then we've got 2 rows of cauliflower, and then a row of collard greens. And I really think that this row right here may wind up being greens as well, just depending on how much space over here those onion starts take up. Farm friends, thank you so much for being here with us today. Like I said, I feel so much gratitude for all of you who are in this journey with us. Thank you so much. As you go through this season or next season, as you go through this year, we hope that you will have gratitude in your hearts as you're doing the work of life, even when it seems monotonous and tough. We hope that you'll feel that gratitude for the love and hope and joy that is all around us, because the most important thing that you can grow on a homestead, on a farm, or in your life in general is love and community and hope and joy. So folks, we hope that those will be your crop of preference going into the next year, because they're sure going to be what we focus on the most here on Head Family Farm. Farm friends, thanks so much for being here. Y'all have a good one.